Welcome, friends, to the House of Hammer. I'm your host, Ben. If you will, allow me to start with a short story. Some years ago, I was staying in a remote cottage. I say cottage, but that's not really an accurate description. It was an odd building, misshapen. The walls were thick stone, the floors aged timber. It was a very, very old house. Like many old houses, it had an odd feeling to it. You know how some buildings just seem to have absorbed what has taken place within, like life, the laughter, the anger, the joy, the tears, all of it somehow soaked into the structure itself. This building had that, but there was something else as well. Like the building itself was, somehow hiding something. I mean, don't get me wrong, there wasn't any clanking of chains or ghostly laughter, but after having stayed there for nearly a week, this feeling got the better of me. So one night I went outside. There's a small vegetable garden at the back of the kitchen. In the light of the rising moon, I stared at this old building. Then it struck me. The building was larger on the outside than it was on the inside. So I went back into the kitchen, and there was this large wooden dresser against one of the walls. Obviously I'd noticed it all week, but I had the sudden feeling that if I looked behind it, I'd find something. The dresser was huge, made of solid oak. It was very, very heavy. I just about managed to inch it away from the wall. It screeched across the floor as I did so. I was just able to drag it far enough away so I could squeeze in behind it. And there, halfway up the wall, was a small door. The door slid up, and I looked inside. There was this shaft. I immediately recognised what it was. It was a shaft for a small freight lift meant for carrying food to an upper floor, what used to be called a dumb waiter. The lift itself was gone, but the shaft remained. I edged my way back out from behind the dresser and headed upstairs. My bedroom was above the kitchen, so the shaft should lead to an opening up there. I looked all over that bedroom, but there wasn't one. Either it had been bricked up or it had never existed. And that's when I pieced it all together. The kitchen below me had a low ceiling, yet the staircase up to the top floor seemed overly long. There was a missing room between the kitchen and the bedroom. A hidden room. How I had the courage for it, I can't really explain, but I picked up a torch and squeezed in behind that dresser again. I then climbed through the little door into the shaft. There were these wooden rungs of some sort on the wall, so I was able to climb, and up I went, about 12 or 13 feet. And then I found it. An opening. The door itself was missing, but planks of wood had been nailed across the door frame to seal it completely shut. I put my eye to the gap between the boards and shone the torch in. As my eyes focused in the gloom, I saw it. Faintly, only for a second, but something in that room moved. Something pale. When the beam of the torch hit it, it edged into the shadows. By now, my heart was racing. The door frame was rotten, so I was able to ease one of the boards off, drop it into the room, and through this larger gap, I again pointed my torch and peered inside. The room was windowless, but there was furniture. There was an old iron bed frame and a rocking chair, but both of them were quite small, as if for a child. The light of the torch couldn't penetrate the darkest corner of the room, the corner I'd seen something disappear into. I removed another board, so I managed to create myself a gap big enough to squeeze in and climb into the windowless room. Once inside, I stood trembling, my vision hampered by my own breath steaming in the cold as I shone the torch around. And then a sound. From behind me. No, beneath me. A screeching. I turned back to the shaft to see the faint light coming from the kitchen disappearing as the old oak dresser was being pushed back into place. Then my torch flickered and died. I stood, in total darkness, total silence, frozen to the spot. And then, at my most terrified, out of the corner of my eye, I saw coming towards me... Oh, forgive me, listener, there's someone at the door. I'll have to finish that story another time. Sorry about that. Turned out to be some Jehovah's Witnesses trying to sell me some double glazing. But speaking of there being someone at the door, coincidentally, that's the title of the film we're taking a look at in this episode. Released in April 1950, Someone at the Door is an adaptation of the hit West End play of the same name that had first been staged in 1935. Hammer's version is actually the second big screen adaptation, the first having been released in 1936, starring Billy Milton and Eileen Marson and directed by Herbert Brennan. Hammer's version stars Michael Medwin, Yvonne Owen, Garry Marsh and Hugh Latimer. That's right, PC-49 himself. It was directed by Francis Searle, and by my calculations this is the fourth Hammer film of his that we've discussed so far, with others to come in future episodes. So it's about time he took his rightful place on our wall of fame for Hammer heroes. And to pull back the velvet curtains and reveal the plaque, figuratively speaking, here's ladies' favourite Kev Moore.
In previous episodes, and indeed later in this one, we mentioned the prolific writer, director, producer and all-round good guy Francis Searle, and we're now at the point where it's getting embarrassing for us not to introduce him as a Hammer hero. And what a learn-fest we're in for. The second son of Benjamin and Jessie Searle was born March the 14th, 1909. Yes, it was that long ago. As it was tradition, it was thought that Francis would, like his brother Gordon, become an upstanding Wesleyan Methodist dentist. His brother would eventually have his own Harley Street practice, and although Francis was naturally fond of the sciences, this wasn't going to be the case. Like his father, he'd also discovered he was a fairly talented artist and a lover of the arts. This was encouraged by regular family visits to the theatre or the cinema. Whilst attending Battersea Grammar School that, in a strange twist of fate, would later become a picture palace itself, he became introverted because of his nervous blinking and stutter. It was later thought that this was brought on by the pressures of being a child of such prolific parents. This was a good thing, for the most part, because he was able to bury himself in books. Hundreds of books. And amongst the classics he devoured, there were several editions of the cinema that were handed down to him from his uncle, who was a shareholder in the chain of ABC cinemas. As a way of getting out of this time of introspection and further pursuing his interests in women and drumming in the school orchestra and regular gigs with bands throughout the 20s, Francis built himself an extroverted persona. All this would not be his only brush with the arts, as he would also have a day job of designing and creating ornate decorations in cinemas that still can be seen in a select few today. He would eventually move on to working for the Columbia Record Company, where he would become responsible for the creation of the lightweight record, which saved the company millions in export shipping fees alone. This would indirectly feed into the birth of the 7-inch single too. As if he wasn't busy enough at this time, he also edited the Cats magazine, where he would eventually meet the legendary Cad-like comedic actor Terry Thomas. The Cats magazine spurred him on to be a little more creative, and he moved on to gain some experience in advertising as a layout artist in 1935. He became very industrious indeed, working on various short productions that would see him turn his hand to set dressing, editing, assistant director and prop buyer at Highbury Studios is where he started to rub shoulders with future stars of the silver screen, and the father of future Hammer hero Jimmy Sangster, all whilst working on such glamorous things as Ovaltine commercials. He found himself working for such companies as British International Films, who famously gave a young Alfred Hitchcock a crack of the whip. Brighton Studios in Hove, where John Gilling would be a regular writer, also kept him busy, along with Marylebone Studios, where he would work alongside the likes of the cameraman and director Jack Cardiff, and where Hammer would start to find its feet in the following decade. It was during this period that, as a fellow set designer, he would also cross paths with J. Elder Wills, one of Hammer's founders, who would become a little more creative with his design work when he was appointed a head of camouflage and sabotage during World War II. Searle's work for GB Screen Services, later renamed Cine Magazine, focused on specially made commercials for the cinema, and One Reel Shorts saw him working every week on something and quickly rising through the ranks and becoming a go-to director, and later taking up work for Gaumont. Things were looking up, that is, until the Second World War came along. He'd already begun making documentaries in 1939, and from then on he would work on many of them for the Ministry of Information. His speciality was producing, with a very small crew, films for the armed forces audiences. This work would occasionally see him covering top-secret projects from training carrier pigeons to death-defying night flying and the making of miniature submarines. As the war got closer to home, he would regularly see himself literally taking his work underground as he worked in his office basement, just a little further down Wardour Street from Exclusive Films. From the Maltese Cross to a travelogue of the Great Western Railway, airwomen to creating a first aid post. Sadly, of the hundreds of short one-reel film subjects he worked on, many haven't survived, and even less are widely documented, and only 7 have made it into the Internet Movie Database. Among his final wartime works was a film called Student Nurse, that would feature a then relatively unknown 15-year-old Gene Simmons that would alter his path in quite a dramatic way. And I'll tell you all about that another time.
So what is Someone at the Door actually about? Well, that's a good question, and the answer is not altogether straightforward. We have a brother and a sister, Ronnie and Sally Martin, living together in an old country house, beautifully portrayed by Oakley Court. The film opens as if it's going to be a ghost story, with their house seemingly haunted. However, the haunting plotline is quickly jettisoned in favour of something else. For reasons not fully explored, Ronnie and Sally are desperate to leave their posh, enormous house and move back to London. But to do so, they need money. Having read about a grisly murder in the paper, Ronnie concocts a plan to pretend to have his sister killed. This will result in his arrest and accompanying media sensation, only for Sally to appear at the trial and reveal herself to be unmurdered, or indeed never having been murdered. Ronnie will then sell his story and presumably skip off into the London sunset with his sister and untold riches before you can say perverting the course of justice and wasting police time.
Sally, I've got a wonderful idea. Don't you see, Sally? Anything to do with murder and you hit the front page. And that means big money. Dismembered body found in barn. Torso discovered in disused quarry. You are. Cartwright to hand tomorrow. I'm a genius. I really am a genius. River dragged for body of missing spinster.
Ronnie, are you serious?
Of course I am. There's a packet in this.
Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful to get out of this depressing old house and back to London?
So we shall. But at the moment, this house is going to be invaluable to us. Ghost and all.
You mean your idea is to stage a murder here and cash in on the publicity?
Got it in one. And a nice, juicy murder it's going to be.
Oh, Ronnie, it's a marvellous idea. Who's to be the victim?
Don't you see, Sally? I'm going to murder you.
In order to make things look convincing, Ronnie recruits the help of Sally's boyfriend, Bill. He then makes a point of being unnecessarily awful to Sally in front of both their neighbour and the local Bobby. So, when she disappears, he'll be the prime suspect. I'm sure we can all agree this sounds like a terrific plan, with no downside whatsoever. Get rich quick with a pretend sister slaying. There must be a word for sister slaying. Sister side?
In Someone at the Door, our main character's great idea is to pretend to have killed his sister in order to boost his journalistic career. Did Ronnie Martin actually expect to produce his sister at the 11th hour and get away with the excuse that it was only a gag? And that this would somehow endear him to not just the media and the public, but also to potential employers? Something tells me that Ronnie's 2 columns short of a front page. In any case, had the police thrown Ronnie in the dock for the murder of his sister, then the charge against him would have been one of sororicide, the act of killing one's sister, taken from the Latin soror, for sister. It's soror that gives its name to sorority, of course, a society or sisterhood of students. Now, had the plan been for Ronnie to fake kill his uncle instead of his sister, then the charge would have been one of avuncularcide, which sounds like a kind of foot powder. Had the shoe been on the other foot and had Sally been the one murdering Ronnie, then she would have been in court on a charge of fratricide, to kill one's brother, from the Latin frater, for brother. Fraternity houses, or frat houses, come from this word too, of course. Lots of Latin went into the planning of college and university institutions. So why then they went and used Greek letters such as Phi, Beta and Kappa to name the houses is anyone's guess. But anyway, if the plan in Someone at the Door had been for Bill, Sally's boyfriend, to fake kill the pair of them, then he'd have been in court charged with familicide. If he and Sally had gotten married before the fake killing, then he might also have been charged with uxoricide, the act of killing one's wife, and maybe even amicicide, the act of killing a friend, depending on whether he considered Ronnie to have been a pal or not. If a revelation had revealed Ronnie to be Bill's father, then he may instead have been charged with patricide, to kill one's father, and a spelling mistake in court might have switched that to parricide, which oddly means the same thing, to kill one's father, plus it adds mother or other close relative to the charge. Parricide also sounds remarkably close to a description of Ronnie, to be honest. Now, if Bill had gotten a taste for killing and gone about systematically bumping all the other men in the film off, then he'd be looking at a charge of androcide, meaning the systematic doing away with of men. Bill's sounding more bloodthirsty by the minute, isn't he? And if he'd stuck to men because of some grudge, then he might be charged with gendercide, the systematic bumping off of a specific sex or gender. It's quite different from genocide, as you probably know. And if his bloodthirsty ambitions had gone on, and he'd wiped out not just the other members of the cast, but the rest of the country, and then gone off and done away with the world entirely, then he would be charged with omnicide, the act of killing all human beings so as to make the species extinct. Although no one would actually be left to charge him with anything in court. As you can probably surmise by the fact that you exist, no one has ever successfully committed omnicide, so one has to wonder why there's actually a word for it. On his way to successfully committing omnicide, of course, Bill the Maniac would have had to at some point committed regicide, the killing of a ruler, such as a king or queen, and tyrannicide, the bumping off of a tyrant. Admittedly, if we at the House of Hammer ever collectively did away with each other, then tyrannicide would have occurred at least twice. What would be left for Bill after so many sides? Well, he could take an axe to the countryside. No, that's not the act of killing the country. That would be ecocide. And if he then started on the cities and urban spaces, he'd be committing herbicide. There is actually also a herbicide. You can buy it from the garden centre. Wonderful on weeds. And as Bill surveyed his scorched, barren planet laid desolate in his wake, he may even turn upon the very words in his lexicon. Yes, there's actually a word to describe the killing off of a language. Linguicide. But what then for Bill? Well, eventually, of course, he'd expire himself in the end, and goodness only knows, after a life spent so violently, he'd be in serious trouble when he met his maker. Unless he bumped him off too. If he did manage that one, he'd be charged with deicide, the act of killing a god or a divine being. Yes, deicide. And all this time you thought your iPhone was auto-correcting you to some nonsense word when you were trying to type decide. But of course all this is poppycock. It's a slightly inconsequential Hammer Studios comedy. Not some dark journey alongside the ecociding, omniciding, herbiciding, herbiciding, linguiciding, amiciding, androciding, uxoriciding, deiciding Bill. He's nothing like that bad. In fact, he's rather harmless. I mean, I wouldn't want to ruin Bill's good name. Good grief. That would mean I'd committed famicide. the act of killing someone's reputation.
If Ronnie's sister Sally is supposed to be murdered, she'll need a place to lay low. And wouldn't you know it, they happen across a secret passage to a hidden room where Sally can bunker down till the heat is off. Or indeed, when the heat is in fact white hot and Ronnie can come out and be tried for soristicide or similar, and Sally can appear and say, "Cooey, it's me, I was dead, but I got better." So anyway, into the secret passage thingy she goes. Everyone loves a secret passage. Not a euphemism, so allow me to blaze through a potted history of the secret passage in approximately 112 seconds. Secret passageways sometimes appear as architectural features, such as fireplaces or built-in sliding bookcases. Others are more elaborately concealed and can be opened by only engaging a hidden mechanism or locking device. Others again are much simpler, for example a trapdoor hidden under a rug. Some are designed to allow inhabitants to escape in an emergency, or for other reasons such as those smuggling firearms, illegal drugs, and contraband. Builders of ancient Egyptian pyramids used secret passages as booby traps to protect the burial chambers from tomb robbers. Catholic priests in Britain used hidden rooms called priest holes to escape Protestant persecution, starting from the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. In 1789, at the outset of what would become the French Revolution, a mob of 7,000 demonstrators marched to the royal palace of Versailles. Although the mob managed to overcome the palace's defences and kill Marie Antoinette's bodyguards, Marie Antoinette herself escaped from the palace through a secret passageway. During the US Prohibition era, illegal bars called speakeasies were often concealed behind, above or below seemingly legitimate businesses designed specifically for illicit bootlegging activities. During World War II, British Royal Air Force officers held captive at Colditz Castle built a false wall in the attic of one of the POW buildings to hide a workshop where they were constructing a glider to help them escape. Secret passageways are still a thing even today. A small number of contractors in the US and the UK specialise in the construction of hidden doors and fortified secret rooms for private residences. These rooms, known as panic rooms, safe rooms, are hidden secure spaces designed to protect inhabitants in the case of a break-in or home invasion. The fortified doors and walls protect the occupants so they can summon help using a mobile or landline phone. Doors and walls can be reinforced with steel, Kevlar, soundproof or bullet-resistant fiberglass panels. The door to the safe room can be concealed by panels that match existing walls or doors in the home. Right, so you might think you're just about keeping up with the plot of this film before everything changes again. The whole Sorra Sistery side plot is abandoned when hidden jewels are found. Thieves want jewels, there's a Scotland Yard detective, a genuine dead body, and a plot twist character reveal.
Ronnie! Bill! Quick, both of you! Come and see what I found. Come quickly. This way. It's better with the go. Sally?
This is an emergency.
There! Take a look at that. The wife and gold jewels, I'm sure of it.
What? The wire and jewels. They were stolen just before we came
There
here.
wasn't a clue as to who done it.
Oh, yes, there was. Don't you remember? A footprint in one of the flower beds made by a surgical boot. It means you can't go on hiding down.
So it's clearly all going on. But is it any good? Well, to discuss it further and to say what we thought, is myself, Kev, Adam and Smokey. Just Smokey. Like Smokey and the Bandit. Only Smokey is the bandit.
First things first then, gents. That opening title sequence. Thoughts?
The 52 version of the end of Predator. That's what that
Oh
was.
my god! That's so right! How did I not see that? Oh my god, Smokey! We're 2 seconds in and you've blown my mind.
It was all I could think about. When you see the end, you see Arnie and you see Jesse Ventura and Bill Duke, and they're all safe, and Shane Black, they're all alive. And this one, it's the start of the film. They're all fine. It's
Do you
just
know what?
like good.
100%. The way you've just described that is that the fact that this happens at the beginning of the film instead of getting to the end of the Predator. The Predator. The teletext.
Predator.
When he gets to the end of Predator and you kind of watch that credit sequence and you're going, oh, I miss him. It's a shame he died. And he's nice. What a nice smile. But you do feel divorced from the reality of what you've just seen. Whereas with someone at the door, the credit sequence at the beginning, I think is bloody genius. Especially because there's a gag at the end where Michael Medwin goes up to the door and it's been closed in his absence, and he's sort of looking around, and he walks into the door and it wobbles, and you think, wobbly set, amateurs, and then the set flies up, doesn't it? And you think, wow, they did the wobbly thing on purpose. That's actually really clever. And he runs over to the film set where they're all waiting for him. Yeah. I think it's brilliant.
Very odd beginning.
I think this is right up there with Fight Club as the greatest intro credit sequence of all time. Thoughts, Ben?
Wow. Ben, what are your thoughts?
What interests me is this is the first in a series of a long line of things in this film that make no sense whatsoever.
It is a long list.
So as extraordinary as the opening sequence is, it has absolutely no bearing or reference to anything that happens in the film from this point onwards. As you say, it's like a reverse credit sequence.
It has really, a great font.
Yeah, don't they all?
It's an animated font. Have you noticed? It actually has moving font, and this is the first time I've seen anything like this. Usually it's just a card slapped in front of the camera.
No.
So,
what beautiful
so
font.
A bit creative.
That needs to go on the new bingo card. It's got a beautiful font.
I'll make a note.
Thank you, mate.
Should we describe what happened?
No, let's just talk about the font.
The opening credits. We're going to probably spend more time on the opening credits than we will on the film.
I think they did on the film.
Yeah. So basically, every member of the cast walks up to a door and sort of turns back to the camera and gives a wink or a smile or a shifty look, and then goes through the door, because this is called Someone at the Door. And each character is introduced. It's very strange, but it's quite a delightful little opening sequence. And I really, really liked it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not a bad setup, though, is it? To start off with something delightful, because it descends rather quickly into screwball comedy madcap territory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for about 6 minutes.
It definitely sets a tone, though, don't you think? It's not like we're in a thriller thing or anything.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Whether the film is successful or not, the tone setting within the first 2 minutes is probably the best thing about it.
I don't think Ben agrees, dear.
Well, I would say the descent is rather rocky, if you think a bit like a plane with a missing engine coming into land, because I don't agree that it necessarily descends into screwball comedy. It spends some time in that genre, but then it shifts into other genres as well. And in fact, I think this film is guilty of probably making its way comfortably through at least 5 different genres of film. So we start with a supernatural comedy that then switches into a kind of a farce based around a faked crime. And then before you know it, we're into actual criminal territory, and then it's a bit of a heist movie, and then there's a mystery element, and then, oh my God, there's a murder, and it's just like, how many different genres are we going to get through here? I was honestly expecting a full song and dance number at the end.
Oh, thank God we didn't.
Do you know what, Ben? You've actually made the film sound way better than it is.
Yeah.
Just describing it that way. It's absolutely all over the place, like you say. It's very strange. It's hard to imagine anyone could have put this down on paper. It looks improvised, don't you think?
Very much
in
so.
Several places.
It looks like the whole thing. They just turned up on the set and they went, "You be that character and you be that character, and you walk into a room and we'll talk to each other for 5 minutes, and I've got a good idea. Let's do a murder thing." It doesn't feel like it was organised in any way.
There's just too much packed in to 57 minutes. It's a 57-minute film. And there are the beginnings of 4 or 5 different types of story. I said before, it shifts genres, but it doesn't just shift genres; it shifts plots. We start a plot, and first 5 minutes, it's meant to be a house that's haunted, and they're being haunted out of their own house. That's completely abandoned after the first 5 or 6 minutes. Then we switch into something else, and there is the beginnings of what we think is going to be the main plot, which is a film about a brother faking the murder of his sister. This is set up to be the main plot. Again, jettisoned completely after about half an hour. And it's almost like they couldn't decide on which direction to take this, and what we end up with is this sort of hodgepodge of 5 or 6 ideas that could have been fleshed out into a full film themselves, all sort of packed in together. It leaves the film feeling rather unsatisfactory.
It's very interesting you say that, though, because I think if you look back to the journey we've taken so far, so if we go back another 4 films. So we come from the Jack of Diamonds, and then we have The Man in Black, we have Meet Simon Cherry, we have Room to Let, not in that order, but we do. This is, if you think about it, this is a mishmash between all of those. So you have forgive the term because I hate it, but the zany comedy of the Jack of Diamonds in the brief moments they did it, with the buddy comedy part. And then you move to Room to Let with the sort of the Man in Black with the possible supernatural element, and then Room to Let of the sort of the gaslighting element. You mash them all together, you get what we are talking about today, but with the heavier emphasis on the comedy. And personally, I mean, I'm only guessing. I don't know, but it feels like this is what Hammer was going for. Was to try and combine all of those films and to try and make one fantastic stew out of all of the ingredients.
Well, do you think it's possibly that it's Francis Searle again who directed Jack of Diamonds? Because he tends to like to put some froth on the top, doesn't he? I mean, I'm talking of froth on the top. We've got the pipe organ that's from a fairground that's in the opening scene, which actually takes you out of it being quite a scary introduction to a film. You've got it very moodily lit and the possibility that the house is being burgled, and then suddenly you've got this zany fairground organ you never see again in the film anywhere along there. But it's just there as a bizarre bit of comedy.
It turned from The Exorcist into Who Framed Roger Rabbit instantly.
Like you say, the plot is literally all over the place. It goes. It's like one of those hospital meter things. It's just exactly. It's like, what? Come on, oh no, it's supposed to be a serious murder. Oh no, it's supposed to be funny. Oh no, I've just stabbed you in the balls. It's like, whoa. It's really hard to get a grip on the film. And it has the worst central conceit, I think, probably of any Hammer film we've watched so far, which is basically a guy says to his sister, I'm going to pretend to murder you, and that will make us really famous and rich. And it's like, really? Would that make you famous and rich? Like, if you pretended to kill your sister and the police arrested you and you went to court and you went, haha, it's all been a joke, do you honestly think that would lead to better career opportunities for you and wealth and success? Do you think people would write about you in years? It's just the weirdest. I don't get. I mean, perhaps the world was a different place back then, but can you honestly see that plan succeeding? I mean, even back then, it must have been like, what is this guy doing? It's like, I don't understand what he's doing. But it's very zany, and it has a lot of elements. I don't think work. I think about 40% of them work. But this is one of the only films I've watched that's a Hammer film from this period where I've sort of gone, oh my God, this is taking forever. And I've glanced at my watch and I've gone, oh no, it's nearly at the end. instead of the other way around, but he goes, it's taking forever. Oh my God, it's got 80 minutes to go or whatever. This is one of the films that I looked at my watch and went, oh my God, this has got to finish soon. Oh, it is finishing soon. Brilliant.
With a plan like that, he might get a job at Tesla anyway.
This is 2021 Hammer bingo cards at the ready. This is yet another example of posh rich people we're meant to feel sorry for because they're like, they require yet more money to do something. Yep. They complain that, we live in this enormous country house, but isn't it dull? And wouldn't it be nice to get back to London? Sell your massive house and move then.
They have a choice. They actually are offered a chance as well by their naughty neighbour, aren't they, to rent out the place for £300. No, 300 guineas. I think he actually ends up offering them.
We must remember the difference between pounds and guineas by now.
Oh yes, we have the expert on here right now. Yes. So do you want to go through it again, Adam?
No, I don't.
Please. But yeah, they're offered 300 guineas per month for 2 months or so. I think he says, doesn't he? He offers them it for a couple of months or so, just for a party, which is an unusual offer. I mean, what kind of crazy party is he planning? Has he gone all Gatsby on us? But yeah, strange one. Someone at the door then. Is it because of the unusual amount of traffic experience that Ronnie comments on? Because, as far as I'm aware, at no point is anybody actually at the door, so to speak. It's not like you've got someone creeping around the house. You've not got anybody lurking.
No, it's a complete misnomer. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like many of the things in this film. But, even if there'd been one key scene where, I don't know, something had been interrupted by someone at the door, or they'd had an unexpected visitor at the door, none of those things happen. None whatsoever. No. So yeah, other than the fact that the door featuring heavily in the aforementioned title credit sequence, there's no more door to see.
This was based on a stage comedy from some time before.
You can tell.
Which, from what I could see in the credits, I think it's something like Major, something or other, and Miss something or other with the same surname. So it looks like it might have been written by a father and daughter to me, instead of, because it would have been, Mrs. Major and Mrs. whatever. It would be the same surname, but it says Major and Miss instead. So it looks like it might have been a bit of fun. They got taken up and made into a stage play. And, everyone bangs on the bloody door in these kind of farce comedy things, don't they? So, but I think they probably kept the name for the movie so as to give it a bit of brand recognition. But I do think that doesn't fit at all. I don't even think, apart from the sliding door, there is even a shot of a door. It's ridiculous.
Something you've touched on there has reminded me as well, because obviously we've already talked about genres and it's been a hodgepodge of various different influences. But the other thing to comment on is the tone.
It's very vaudeville.
It goes very quickly from it's very light to being quite dark. I mean, the sequence where he's plotting to pretend to murder his sister. In order to make this believable, he has to sort of act as a maniac in front of a policeman and neighbours. And he overacts it to the point of it being like quite uncomfortable to watch, because he's really awful to her. And you think this is lost to all comedic element here. Either you could blame the lack of deft touch from the actor or bad direction or whatever you want to do. But towards the film as well.
When would be the last time that you did set eyes on him in a manner of speaking?
Oh, the day he left us.
Stop interfering, you turbulent hellcat! You're always butting in and I'm getting sick of it, do you hear?
But, sir...
Sick of it!
Miss Martin was only answering me lawful questions, as you might say.
Then you shouldn't ask them, as you might say.
But, sir, the inspector...
Blast the inspector! Tell the inspector to mind his own infernal business. We have not seen Soames. We do not want to see Soames. And if we had seen Soames, we wouldn't tell you we'd seen Soames.
Listen, Ronnie.
Shut up! Another word out of you and I'll clown you.
Ronnie, have you gone crazy?
She drives me mad with her chattering. Chitter-chatter, chitter-chatter, chitter-chatter. And so do you. With your notebook and your infernal pencil and your Soames and your idiotic helmet. Get out! Out!
There's also a scene where the villain, on more than one occasion, threatens to burn a woman's eye out with a cigar, and you think, this isn't funny. I'm not laughing here.
No, I totally agree.
And we should point out that we do have a returning Hammer character from earlier, PC-49 himself, Mr. Hugh Latimer, the sport Ed Tudor Pole's ancestor from somewhere along the line from many years ago, and that we mentioned before. But also, so he's with the main female character, which is Sally, and he right at the very beginning of the film, he sees her getting roughed up. He doesn't recognise it's her brother that's roughing her up, and he belts him in the face. You get a bit of clobber action, and then for the rest of the film, apart from one moment right towards the end, he's very lackadaisical about the way that Ronnie treats Sally, and it's such a weird dynamic. And then suddenly, again towards the end of the film, we get, for want of a better term, a quite romantic scene where he's obviously rather horny and he's wanting to be with his woman. And don't give me that look. And
he's wanting to be with his woman.
There you go. He's wanting intimacy. There we go. And thank you. Yeah. He's not wanting to be with Jesus. He's wanting to be with his woman. And
after this film, I'd go for Jesus.
Well, yeah. But then that's kind of played down, and it's a really strange dynamic because it's like the brother and he end up as the best friends, but then also he's with the sister. And again, it's a mess. Right, I think that's the best term we're going to come up with for this film. It's a mess. Right? Nothing sticks. As Ben said, how many plot lines do we get? 4 different ones? And they change, so 5? All right, 5. And they change, and there is no better word for this film than a mess.
I do agree, on most of that. I think it's very rare that you see a film that's been a stage play transferred to, the screen, that you think, oh God, it feels so much like a stage play. But in this case, I think this is the only time I've ever said this, I think it would have been better had it stayed a stage play, because I can see people running in and out of a room, and, the goodies run out that door and the baddies come in and they explain the plot, and then they go out that door, and, the goodies come back in and they do this thing. But it doesn't translate in this story, and I just don't think it really works as a film. But it's been, do you know what? I thought to myself when I was watching this, it's very interesting because Danny Green is in this film, and he is, very well known for The Lady Killers and, all these kind of like heavy
One Round.
roles. Yeah, One Round. And it struck me when I was watching this, Garry Marsh is in this film from Death in High Heels, Hugh Latimer, as you say, from PC-49, and Michael Medwin, who's kind of a mainstay in that kind of era of British cinema. It strikes me as being one of these films where you kind of realise that Hammer's been kind of bringing all these big stars up who are going to be kind of legendary in the years to come. We've had Sid James already. We've had Charles Hawtrey. We've had Bela Lugosi, for God's sake. We've had Paul Robeson. We've had, all these great stars. Hammer, although they haven't established themselves as a studio, are really doing their bit to raise the profiles of these names and these people and these faces. And it was rather delightful, I think. One of the positives to come out of this film, not the film itself, because it's like, as you say, Smokey, mess is a perfect word. It's an eaten mess. It's absolutely all over the face. You just smash the thing to pieces.
It's a posh mess.
But I when I saw Danny Green walking onto the screen and sort of turning back to the camera in the opening credit sequence, and seeing Francis Searle's name in the credits as well, and Michael Medwin, I did think to myself, they really were doing their bit for British cinema at this point, and it's made me realise that we've had some really great stars in Hammer films, even though they're not the biggest studio in the world. It's been really lovely to see them evolve along with the British film industry at the time.
Going back to Hugh Latimer's character and his weird shift, do you think it's because he's trying to play the straight man to Ronnie and Michael Medwin? And do you think perhaps it's possibly a miscast character? Do you think perhaps it could have been better done? Well, both. Do you think it would have worked better if Hugh Latimer had been the lead, and had brought a bit more gravitas to it, and maybe even the tone out a bit? Or do you think that might have actually upset the balance too much in the other way and made it too grim a film for 50 minutes?
I think the problem is with Michael Medwin's casting, because, as I said before, his transition from being bumbling fool to over-the-top violent man is too great. He's too believable as the unpleasant side of his character, for one. It's one of the few problems. I mean, very ironically, I think Charles Hawtrey would have been perfect as the brother, because it's an odd dynamic anyway, there being a brother and sister partnership. And he would have brought to that partnership, that sort of a less threatening angle. When he lost his temper, it would have been funny rather than imposing. You wouldn't have felt he was actually any real threat to his sister. And I think that's where the problem lies with that dynamic between him and his would-be brother-in-law, is that they're too similar for a start, in perhaps even both in looks, but in the way in which they're acting their parts. It actually brings me back a bit to Sport in Love, where you just think, oh, they're a couple of buffoons. I don't really want to watch you two being idiots when I could be watching, other members of the cast. But yeah, I mean, that's my take on it. Smokey, what do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. But the part of the brother, I think he needs to be diminutive because he's not bigger than his sister. He needs to be like how do I put this? As a submissive who is trying to prove that he's a dominant. And so if you've got him as Hugh Latimer, if you had him as that, he'd be too tall, too not overpowering because he's a stick insect, isn't he? So, just, there needs to be a different Michael Ripper, right? Hammer mainstay.
Good call. Yeah.
He would have been perfect in that role. He could have nailed it. And you get the fine balance there. Because, I mean, look, the two main times we've seen Michael Ripper before, he played a crook and then he played a nice guy. Right, and he handled both of them well. This is what that part was calling for. He would have been absolutely perfect for this role. And so to go back to the original question, a serious miscast on this one, and it's a damn shame as well because it would have elevated the film a lot more if they had got someone else.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I've seen Michael Medwin in many, many films, and he fits many roles. But definitely not. So it's very odd. It takes a certain... I don't even think it's a certain type of acting talent. I think it's a certain type of physicality. And I think Ben nailed it with Charles Hawtrey. I think he needed to be, in a way, and this is a very odd word to use, I grant you, but sexless. He needed to be not in any way threatening. Therefore, when he becomes threatening, it's funny. And I think Michael Medwin is too... Although he's, a funny knockabout guy, he does, he's handsome and he's kind of generic in a way. And I think that when he does violent, you go, Jesus. And it shocks you out of your connection with the film. And I think when he does funny, it makes you think that too. So I definitely think he's miscast in this film. I don't even think his performance is very good in this film. I think he's actually plain bad in this film. And I think he kind of ruins a lot of it. Hugh Latimer, I think, is great. But I think he's great in everything. And I think the girl who plays Sally is fantastic. I think Danny Green's fantastic. I think Garry Marsh is actually really good. The material's very, very thin. And it required, I think, better casting than they got here. But Michael Medwin, as much as I like him in most things I've seen him in, I just think he's very, very bad in this film and totally miscast.
I'm glad you mentioned Garry Marsh there because I would just like to say I swear that guy has an RSJ across his back because he does have the widest shoulders.
He's definitely got one under his nose.
Seen.
Across his top lip. That man has the fiercest moustache I've ever seen.
But that scene when he's walking down the driveway, it is like a brick wall walking down the driveway. He's massive.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I knew Danny Green was a big lad, but this guy is... Dear me. Yeah.
Well, talking of Danny Green, again, we've got another set of help that is useless as the help. Yeah, again, we should have that on the bingo card, definitely.
Yeah.
We do tick we do tick off another...
Ben's making notes, people.
Ding, ding.
Yes. Well, we also tick off another one on the bingo card as well, which is the useless police constable, who is completely out of his depth and Cornish for some reason in this one.
I thought he was Irish.
Really?
Perhaps he moved.
I heard Irish.
I think it was a combination of the two, wasn't it?
To be honest,
South African,
Smokey,
who can tell?
Your Vincent Price sounds Irish.
or is it Cornish?
Wow. We've gone there, have we? We've gone there already.
We don't know where it's from.
Ireland or Truro?
Oh, I'll take you there, don't worry. Sorry, carry on.
Well, I think we should bring this in then.
I think we're good.
Okay, so we'll go to our personal views on this fine film. Adam, what did you think to Someone at the Door?
You know what? The first time I watched it, I was utterly... I don't even know the word. I was watching and I was
I can think of several.
I was struggling to stay to give it my attention. I just couldn't engage with it at all. And I thought, this is so bad. I henceforth revisited it. I've seen it twice now. And my opinion of it has improved, but I still don't think it's don't think it's a great movie. It's a mess. It's hard to engage with, but it does improve upon a second viewing. I would probably give this a 4 out of 10. It's not great, and it's got a horribly miscast lead. The plot doesn't make any sense at all, and it's one of those things that you watch and you just kind of it's like driving down a road. You don't notice the trees that are going on the side of you particularly. It's one of those films that just washes past you, and you get to the end and you go, what happened? I don't understand. It's fine, and there are some good performances. I just think the material is absolute pants, and it would have been better as a stage play. So 4 out of 10.
Yeah. And Someone at the Door we've already discussed as being a terrible title. So what would you have given it as a title?
I would have given it the title Die Medwin Die. Die!
Can't argue with that.
Nice.
Ben, over to you.
Yeah, very similar to Adam. It did improve slightly on a second watch, but it's a mess. That's the byword. That's the episode byword, isn't it? I give it a 5. It was okay. There are elements in it to enjoy. There are certain bits of certain scenes and I do like elements of the conceit, particularly about the hidden passage and all of that. But no, it's just bang average, isn't it? So 5 out of 10. And in terms of alternate titles, I've got 2 suggestions. One, I think, is an infinitely better, sensible suggestion, which would be to call the film Best Laid Plans, because there are lots of plans.
Yeah.
But then there's the American title.
The Heidi Hole Mystery, I'd opt for.
That's your erotic novel.
You could call it Paul Shane Goes Fishing, and it would make as much sense to the plot as Someone at the Door. Yeah.
Good point, yeah. Smokey.
A little behind the curtain for the listeners. When we spoke the other night, you all said, right, it does get better on the second viewing. And you're right, it does. But not enough to elevate it anymore. From a 4 to a 5, it literally, I had it as a 4 the first watch, and I've put it to a 5, and I think I'm being generous, to be perfectly honest. And this is out of 10, by the way, for anyone who's listening.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's 5 out of 10. Yeah. So, yes, miscasting of the main character is bad. The opening of it, the opening 5 minutes was annoying every time I watched it, and it really bugged me, because you get this ridiculous haunted house, and then as you say, the fairground noise, and it was just, oh god, it was just annoying. Couple of good ideas in there. I liked the cast. The rest of the cast were great. I've got to give them that. And we haven't mentioned the score by Frank Spencer.
Oh, yeah.
So, and it was
clarinets this time. No harp.
No harp. No harp. Sadly,
Only a musician
no
would
harp.
notice that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kev.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah. But it's, just coming back to that word, it's a mess. It's a mess in tone. It's a mess in comedy. It's a mess in drama. And also is the fact that the end of the film is all based around basically the main character turning into Cary Grant and his girl Friday and thinking he's got the best scoop in the entire world, when he really, really hasn't. And it's just, it was a pitiful ending. And so I was a bit gutted by it. So yeah, I'm going to stick with it. I'm a 5 out of 10. It's not the worst we've seen, but it's certainly nowhere near the best we've seen. In regards to alternate titles, I came up with one, because I love alliteration, I came up with Making Money from Murder, with a question mark at the end. So Making Money from Murder? Like that.
Oh.
There you go.
Cool.
Don't laugh.
There's a laugh of approval.
Said no man ever.
What did you think of this film, Kev?
Sorry.
I'm even less forgiving than Smokey. I'm giving this a 4 after upping it from a 3. Again, a second viewing definitely helps. And I had to do a third viewing because I had to take notes, and I forgot to take notes on the second viewing because I sat there going, "What's happening now? Wait a second. Oh, I can't take notes."
Is that your alternate title, Kev? What's happening now?
What's happening now? I had a nap.
Yes.
WTF.
For the American audience. So, yeah, again, I can't really echo any more than what you've already said, but there were some odd choices, and it certainly doesn't really scream Hammer to a lot of people. You know, there's a lot of stuff on here that it could be any studio. It could be more
Ealing?
It could be more Ealing than anything else.
No. Don't you dare say it's an Ealing film.
But he's
dare
right,
you,
though.
sir?
He's right. This is much more Ealing than Hammer.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
definitely pitched at the Ealing Studios audience rather than anything else. And my alternate title would have been The Haunted House of Murder.
That is
On the
really
nose?
building up people's expectations, Kev, to something it really isn't. That title's the equivalent of 1980s computer game box art, only to be let down
is,
by the
yeah.
pixelated nonsense within.
I love that the best thing about this film, I think we can all agree, is the opening credit sequence.
Yep.
Which is over in about 1 minute. Now, I know Benny don't like it, but it's still better than the film. He walks into the door, it wobbles, you go, oh, it's a wobbly set, oh, and then it comes up, and you go, oh, it's a film set, he knew what he was doing. And then he runs over to like the cameraman and sort of stands with the rest of the cast, and they're all like stood there going, hey, we're in on the joke kind of thing. It's like, wow, 4 out of 10. Thank you. One round. Yeah, what a shame.
So, there you have it. Someone at the Door. A spectacularly mediocre mess. Speaking of which, before we leave you for this episode, here's Smokey again with a brand new segment.
I'd like to formally welcome you all to a new segment of the podcast. It's not something we will revisit all of the time, but one we will come back to from time to time. Every now and again, we are the lucky recipients of a letter, a missive, an SOS, if you will. Some poor, unfortunate lost soul who feels like they have nowhere else to turn in their hour of need, reaching out into the abyss for some semblance of normality, a desperate need of validation, some hope, some salvation. Yes, that's right, they then send it on to 4 English podcasters. Some people, huh? So, the first letter reads, Dear House of Hammer, that's us. I have a rather bizarre problem I hope you can help me with. My name is Sally. I don't claim to lead a bad existence. I live in a beautiful country manor bequeathed to my brother and I from a relative that passed away several years ago. My brother Ronnie is a little sketchy to say the least. He fancies himself as a budding reporter, but when he isn't hunched over his typewriter, he's always coming up with harebrained schemes to earn money, and not always with the purest of methods. His latest idea is he's going to convince the townsfolk and the local constabulary that I am dead, and that he himself did me in. And then somehow we're going to profit off of the surrounding furore that follows said fable. I want to reassure you that I'll be perfectly safe and ensconced in the basement of the house, with the occasional company of my intended, Bill. Something just isn't sitting right with me, and I'm a tad uncomfortable with the whole scenario. Any advice you can give me would be greatly appreciated. Help me, House of Hammer. You're my only hope. Sally. Well, first of all, Sally, all I can say is yikes. I mean, your brother sounds like an absolute fruitcake of the highest order. and I can neither confirm nor deny that his antics made one of their House of Hammer hosts to exclaim on 2 separate occasions that he wanted to, quote, off him by strangulation, unquote. Well, as you said at the start of your letter, it's a very bizarre problem, but something tells me that for now it's probably best to make the most of your situation, as ludicrous as it sounds. Maybe take in your surroundings, try to look at the positives, not get too bogged down by the finer details. Also, and this is just a guess, mind you, if it's an old country house with a basement, make sure to check any suits of armour that are lying around, because you never know what treasures they could be hiding. Yeah, that'll do. Well, I hope that helps, Sally, and thank you very much for being the first to take advantage of our myriad of services. Help me, House of Hammer. It's got quite a ring to it, doesn't it?
Thanks, Smokey. Our very own Dear Deirdre. Well, that's just about it for this episode. Should you wish to follow us on the socials, you can do so on Twitter at HouseHammerPod. I do most of the tweeting, so it's guaranteed to be a good time with high-quality content. You can also follow us at HouseHammerPod on Instagram. And should you wish to go old school and send us an email, get one of your grandchildren to type scream@househammerpodcast.com into the address box and fire away. Until next time, it's goodbye from me, Ben Taylorson.
From me, Smokey.
From me, Adam Roach.
And from me, Kev Moore.
And if you're still wondering what I saw all those years ago in that hidden room of that old country cottage, I'm afraid, dear listener, it made me promise never to say. We look forward to welcoming you back next time to the House of Hammer.